Today we have 4 of the scariest ghost stories taken from Reddit. Please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. I am your host, Severed Soul. The Hitchhiker, from Reddit user BangBangBeauty. My family hired a minibus so we could all go out of town for my daughter's birthday. My dad was driving and we set off for our 1.5 hour drive. The weather was miserable. It was autumn time and the rain was just pouring down. It was around 8 o'clock at night and it was pitch black. We got maybe 30 to 40 minutes into our journey when we saw a man standing at the side of the road trying to hitch a ride. My mum, feeling bad for the guy, told my dad to pull over and offer the guy a lift. My dad apprehensively pulled over and opened the door for the man and told him where we were going. The man climbed in the car, sat down, and never said a word. We all just sat there in complete silence the whole 10 to 15 minutes the guy was in there with us. And without saying a single word, the man stood up. My dad pulled over at the side of the road and the man climbed out. We were all in shock as it was pouring down with rain and the man had no coat, no umbrella, nothing. It was just him. The really weird thing was, he was bone dry. There wasn't a single drop of water on him. This made absolutely no sense whatsoever, considering it was raining cats and dogs. As we pulled away, we all looked back to take another look at the man. He was nowhere to be seen. He'd completely vanished into thin air. To this day, none of us can explain what happened, and it still gives me chills. I Don't Think I'm Alone by Reddit user EnoughEmu2573. For a bit of context, I've lived with my mother and younger sister all my life, as well as my grandmother who passed away a few years ago. The only tragedy that we're aware of that occurred at this house was the family that lived here before us had a baby who had sadly passed away in the bedroom that's now mine. I'm mostly alone in the house, as my sister is always out and my mother is usually at work. Around a year ago, some creepy things started to happen in the house that I really can't explain. Every other day things would go missing and then I'd find them in random places. Items such as jewellery, money, etc. And then it was photographs and other random items. Not only that, when I'm in bed at night, I can hear disembodied voices coming from the hallway, but nobody else in the house can ever hear them. And when I'm alone, things get worse. It feels like I'm constantly being watched. From behind the door, by the window, and even right behind me. There's been times when I've seen a tall apparition standing by the door, especially on the evenings. This is followed by shuffling sounds and other random noises. At first I was petrified, but I'm getting used to it now. Sometimes the presence even seems to bring a feeling of calm. The reason I'm writing this is because of an incident that happened just the other day. I was home alone, as usual, when I heard the bathroom light switch on by itself. Apprehensively, I went to check. There was nobody there. I turned the light off again and turned towards the living room. As I turned, I was greeted by a shadowy figure, which quickly vanished into the living room, where once again the light turned on by itself. I have seen many shadow figures, but this time I was really creeped out. Am I crazy? Is someone from my family playing tricks on me? Or is my house really haunted? My experiences growing up in a haunted house by Reddit user Anonymous. This is my experience of growing up in a haunted house. For me, it was normal. It was just part of my life. But to other people, my house was terrifying. It was decorated almost completely in Victorian antiques, and the front of the house was surrounded entirely by a rusty old iron cemetery fence. So, right off the bat, it was bound to feel creepy. In the house, I always felt like I was being watched. There was a hallway that connected all of the ground floor rooms, as well as a staircase that went directly up into my bedroom. This hallway always had a weird energy to it. It always felt like there was somebody standing there. Can't really explain it. It just always felt like there was someone there. You'd constantly be looking over your shoulder at the doorway behind you. It was especially hard getting to sleep, and I was paralysed by dread each and every night. On this feeling, I had many odd experiences as well. I had a Barbie washing machine that randomly turned on in the night on 3 separate occasions. Another time, right as I left my room, a radio that I'd never used turned on by itself, playing opera music. On another occasion, a friend and I were in the basement when we heard creaking sounds, as if somebody was walking up and then back down the stairs, but there was nobody there. On 2 separate occasions, my phone disappeared, only to reappear hours later in the middle of the floor. And once, while I was asleep, a random voice spoke into my ear telling me to wake up. Usually, my mother would wake me up, but on this occasion, she'd forgotten. I also had an auditory experience once of a cat. I was home alone watching TV when I heard purring coming from behind the couch. This was where my old cat used to hang out. Purring came around to the front of the couch, and then by my ear, as if the cat was nuzzling me, but there was nothing there. It did, however, give me a very peaceful feeling. I saw 2 apparitions while I was living in that house. The first happened when I was about 10 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a girl just standing there. She was wearing a Victorian-style nightgown and she had long hair. She was probably about 5 years old or so. She was staring straight ahead, and she was almost transparent, but glowing blue in the moonlight. She walked over to the stuffed animals I had by the side of my bed, and she started to touch them. So I asked her, "Do you like my toys?" She immediately seemed spooked, as if she hadn't seen me there before, and she ran towards the door. Then she completely disappeared as she got to the hallway. It sounds scary, but it really wasn't, and before long I fell back to sleep. I saw the second apparition when I was about 18 years old. I dropped a friend off at her house that night and returned home to see a figure standing in the kitchen window overlooking the front of the house. My mum would usually stand in this window while she did the dishes, so I thought nothing of it at first. But as I got out of the car, I realised there were no cars on the driveway, which meant there was nobody home. I got straight back in my car and called my parents to come home. I didn't get out of my car until they returned home, and they just laughed at me. Of course, they didn't believe me. Over the years, I encountered many other unexplainable experiences, some of which were witnessed by other people. These experiences followed me to my workplace, and then to my first apartment, but stopped once I moved out of state. I'm very grateful that I can finally live in peace, and not be constantly looking over my shoulder. It's definitely stressful, growing up like I did. Paranormal occurrences with my daughter. By Reddit user Investment Fit 6797. Since my now 15-year-old daughter was little, strange occurrences have happened, and it seems to be centred mainly around her. Not all, but the majority. We've lived in 3 different houses together, and from every single one we have a story to tell. Multiple stories actually, including family and friends who've also experienced things as well. From the time my daughter was little, she was terrified to sleep on her own because of the things she would see, such as a tall man in a black suit and a lady who would often try to talk to her. And the name she'd given turned out to be a relative who she would never have known. A relative who had lived in that home 50 years before us. She wasn't a close relative, nor one that I ever knew, so she didn't hear that name from me. I'm being vague with the details, but there are several other encounters that I could talk about for hours on end. Unfortunately, a few months ago, that particular home of ours burned down, so we're now renting an old farmhouse. Before we actually moved into this home, one night, my youngest 5-year-old daughter and I were there alone. It was late at night, and I was cleaning the upstairs in preparation for moving in. While I was busy running the vacuum around, my daughter frantically stopped me and told me she wanted to leave. I told her, "No, I'm busy, I need to finish cleaning." She said, "But Mummy, I want to leave because the little girl is copying me and I don't like it." I looked at her confused. "What girl? What are you talking about?" Thinking somehow my eldest had come over with a family member and was trying to scare us. My youngest said, "I was singing Ring Around the Roses and the little girl was singing it with me and I didn't like it." She said, "Here, come with me and I'll show you." My little one began singing, and I heard nothing at first, until the very end. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. There were no voices, but it sounded like little footsteps coming from the downstairs living area, to which my mind envisioned a little child falling down, as the song portrays. I was terrified. I grabbed my little one and said, "Okay, maybe we will go." I raced downstairs and turned off all the lights and had a look around just to make sure there was nobody there trying to scare us. Of course, there was nobody there, so we bolted out the door as quickly as possible. However, we did move in a week later, and initially things were fine. No more strange occurrences. That was until this last month. Occasionally, I began hearing and seeing what looked like my daughters walking around from room to room. Only it couldn't possibly have been them. They were either sleeping, or in another part of the house, or not at the house at all. I kept this to myself as I didn't want to scare my girls. But a few nights ago, my eldest was upstairs in her room, while my youngest was on my bed trying to fall asleep. She was having a rough night. She was scared of some monster, so she wanted to sleep with the lights on. I just managed to calm her down. She was just falling asleep when my eldest screamed from upstairs. She came running downstairs screaming for her little sister, as she could see, was falling asleep in my arms. My eldest was crying her eyes out. She was absolutely terrified by something that she'd seen. She explained that she was sitting at her vanity when she looked in the mirror, when she could see her door slowly start to open. And there, she explained, was her sister, standing there holding the doorknob, just grinning at her. My eldest immediately turned to ask her sister why she was up so late. But as she turned to speak to her, there was nobody there. It scared her to her core, and she swears on her life her sister was standing there 1 second, and then she was gone. She swore that her door had opened to begin with, which surprised her because she wasn't expecting anybody to be up there so late. She was on FaceTime with a friend at the time, who also claimed to hear the door opening. The friend said she watched my eldest turn her head to see who was there, and then all of a sudden she just totally freaked out. As I said previously, I've seen the girls myself, when they aren't really there. And now my eldest has witnessed it too. I'm certain we aren't crazy. I've had other people witness things too, in every home we've lived in. I feel like my eldest is sensitive to the paranormal. Hell, maybe all three of us are. I don't understand why these creepy things keep happening to us. That wraps things up for today. Please share your thoughts in the comment section down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for a feast of grim and grisly content. I'm your host, Severed Soul.